There are moments in history when power shifts quietly, without fanfare, without announcement, without a single word spoken in public. The kind of shift that happens in the background while the world is looking somewhere else. What happened to the British royal family in September 2022 was exactly that kind of moment. And the consequences of that shift are still echoing through Buckingham Palace today, rattling the foundations of relationships that were already fragile, and leaving one very powerful woman staring at a future she never prepared for. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away at Balmoral Castle on September 8, 2022, the world mourned the loss of a monarch who had defined an era. 70 years on the throne. 15 prime ministers. A reign that stretched from the age of Churchill to the age of smartphones. The grief was genuine and global. But inside the walls of the royal family, something else was happening simultaneously, something the cameras did not capture and the newspapers barely covered. A chain of legal and financial transfers fired off automatically the moment the Queen drew her last breath. Charles became king. That part everyone understood. But what very few people fully grasped was what happened to William in that same instant. The moment his father became King Charles III, Prince William, at just 40 years old, became the Duke of Cornwall. It was not a ceremony. It was not a decision. It was law, ancient and unchanged for nearly 7 centuries. And with that title came something that would alter the balance of power inside the royal family in ways that are only now becoming fully visible. William became the owner of the Duchy of Cornwall, one of the oldest, largest and most financially significant private estates in the entire United Kingdom. The numbers alone are staggering. The Duchy of Cornwall encompasses roughly 135,000 acres of land spread across more than 20 counties in England and Wales. It includes vast stretches of Dartmoor in Devon, the near entirety of the Isles of Scilly sitting off the southwest coast of England, historic castles, working farms, coastal properties, holiday cottages, and decades' worth of carefully managed financial investments. The total value of the estate sits at approximately $1.2 billion. By 2025, William was drawing around $30 million annually from its revenues, an income he voluntarily pays tax on despite having no legal obligation to do so. The duchy was created in 1337 by King Edward III, designed specifically for his eldest son and heir to the throne, Edward the Black Prince. The founding principle was deliberate and far-sighted. The estate would provide the heir with complete financial independence from the reigning monarch. It was a built-in separation of power, ensuring that the future king could never be financially pressured or controlled by his father. Nearly 700 years later, that same principle was now protecting William from his own father, and it was about to have consequences that Camilla's family would feel very personally. Because buried inside that billion-dollar estate was an arrangement that had been running quietly for nearly 2 decades. An arrangement that said everything about how Camilla Parker Bowles had operated since the day she entered the royal family officially in 2005. When Charles was Duke of Cornwall, he had hired Camilla's younger sister, Annabel Elliot, as an interior designer for duchy properties. She worked on holiday cottages across the Isles of Scilly, on historic properties at Restormel Castle, on the Wynie Wermid estate in Wales, and on a conversion project at Dumfries House in Scotland. She was reportedly named among the most influential interior designers in Britain, and by all accounts her work was of genuine quality. But the manner in which she got the contract was something else entirely. There was no open competition, no formal bidding process, no independent review panel. She was awarded the work because her sister had married the man who owned the estate. That was the beginning and the end of the justification. For nearly 20 years she collected a royal paycheck funded by the Duchy of Cornwall, the same estate now inherited by Diana's son. When William became Duke of Cornwall and the annual financial accounts of the duchy were published, one name was conspicuously absent. Annabel Elliot had been removed from the payroll. No press conference. No statement. No explanation beyond careful language from royal sources suggesting the decision was no reflection on the quality of her work. Everyone inside the royal family understood what it actually reflected. A separate royal source was considerably more direct, stating that William had wanted to cut away what were described as royal hangers-on and reduce the culture of lavish spending his father had cultivated during his long tenure managing the duchy. That phrase, royal hangers-on, landed like a stone in still water. It made clear exactly how William viewed the arrangement his father had constructed around Camilla's comfort and her family's financial benefit. At the same moment Annabel's name disappeared, William began filling duchy positions with people from his own circle, including close personal friends who serve as godparents to his children. The message required no translation. The era of Charles's duchy was over. William's had begun. To understand why this removal carried such emotional weight beyond its financial dimensions, you have to go back further. Back to the years before Camilla was queen, before she was even princess, when she was simply the woman Charles had never stopped loving despite everything it cost his family. During the years of Charles and Diana's marriage, when the affair between Charles and Camilla had to remain hidden from public view, they needed somewhere private to meet. Somewhere away from the scrutiny that came with royal life. That somewhere was a quiet country house in Dorset belonging to Annabel Elliot. For years, her home provided the cover that the affair required. She was not a passive figure in the background of this story. She was a participant in a deception that Diana's own sons eventually learned about, understood, and carried with them into adulthood. The idea that this same woman was then handed a lucrative contract funded by the estate connected to Diana's son and Diana's legacy is the kind of detail that sits uncomfortably in the stomach once you understand it. William understood it. He had understood it for years. And when he finally had the legal authority and financial independence to act on that understanding, he acted. Quietly, efficiently, and without a single unnecessary word. But the Annabel situation, significant as it was, represented only one dimension of a much larger conflict that had been building inside the royal family for years. The relationship between William and Camilla is not simply the relationship between a stepson and a stepmother who never quite bonded. It is far more layered than that. When Charles announced his intention to marry Camilla in 2005, both William and Harry went to their father privately beforehand. They told him they supported him. They told him they accepted Camilla in his life. They made one request. Please do not marry her. Be together, they said, but spare them and spare the country the public spectacle of comparing Diana to the woman who had been her husband's mistress throughout their marriage. Charles listened. Then he married her anyway. The official public line at the time was carefully managed. Buckingham Palace made an announcement that when Charles eventually became king, Camilla would hold the title of princess consort. She would not be queen. That was the stated agreement, the public promise offered to manage the reaction. William accepted it, attended the wedding, and kept whatever he felt about it somewhere private and inaccessible to the public eye. Then in February 2022, Queen Elizabeth II marked her Platinum Jubilee with a public message in which she expressed her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. The promise of Princess Consort began to dissolve. Then came the coronation in May 2023, and the word consort quietly disappeared altogether. Camilla was queen. Fully, officially, completely. The title that William and Harry had once stood in their father's presence and asked him to never allow had become reality, rewritten in stages, each stage presented as natural and appropriate, each stage moving further from the original commitment. Royal sources later suggested that Camilla had never truly intended to accept anything less than the full title. The rewriting of the promise had always been the plan. William watched every stage of this process. He said very little publicly. But those close to him described a resentment that was deep, carefully managed, and absolutely not forgotten. Royal commentators noted that William is more diplomatic than his brother Harry, more contained, less likely to speak publicly about grievances. But containment is not the same as acceptance. And the discipline with which William has operated since becoming Duke of Cornwall suggests a man who has been thinking strategically for a very long time. The tension surfaced publicly in ways that made the underlying conflict impossible to fully ignore. At Sandringham, where the royal family has gathered for Christmas across generations, a confrontation developed when Camilla chose to invite her son Tom Parker Bowles from her first marriage to the family Christmas celebration. Reports indicated that William made his position clear privately. He would not attend the main Christmas lunch if Tom was present. Camilla invited her son regardless, later telling him she had not spent Christmas with him in a long time. Tom came to Sandringham. William did not attend the main gathering. He remained at Amer Hall, his own residence on the estate, and spent the holiday there with Kate and their children. The future King of England was absent from the primary family Christmas at an estate he would one day own, because the current Queen had invited a guest and declined to reconsider. Then came a public moment in September 2025 during Donald Trump's state visit to Windsor Castle. Kate had fallen into what observers described as an easy and genuinely warm conversation with Melania Trump when Camilla approached and made a brief, firm gesture in Kate's direction. Body language analysts who examined footage of the moment described it as unmistakably dismissive, comparing it to a superior signaling a subordinate to step aside. The clip spread rapidly across social media platforms and generated significant commentary because of what it appeared to show, the Queen publicly dismissing the future Queen in front of international guests and world leaders. Behind the scenes, Sources indicated that the moment hit William hard and that he considered it a line that had been clearly crossed. All of this is prologue to the largest vulnerability in Camilla's position, the one that sources say genuinely frightens her as Charles's health remains uncertain. Sandringham House in Norfolk and Balmoral Castle in Scotland are not crown properties administered by the government. They are privately owned estates that pass from one generation to the next as personal inheritance. Queen Elizabeth inherited both from her father King George VI. When she died, they passed to Charles. When Charles dies, they pass to William. Together, the two estates represent over $200 million in private property. Camilla currently lives in these homes. None of them belong to her in any legal sense. Not a single document gives her a guaranteed right to remain. What makes this situation particularly stark is a decision Camilla made years ago that she cannot reverse. She once owned a private property of her own, a house in Wiltshire called Ray Mill House that she had purchased before she married Charles. She spoke warmly about it, describing the garden there as deeply restorative and calling it a genuine personal sanctuary away from the pressures of royal life. She sold it. She sold the one property that was entirely and exclusively hers. The reasons offered at the time centered on her desire to commit fully to royal life alongside Charles. The consequence of that decision is that when Charles is gone, Camilla will have no private home of her own anywhere in Britain. She will live wherever William decides she should live. Whether she remains at Sandringham or Balmoral, whether she retains access to any of the residences she currently calls home, will be determined entirely by the goodwill of a man who removed her sister from his payroll without a single public word, who spent Christmas in a separate building rather than share a table with her chosen guest, and who has watched quietly for decades as promise after promise made to his mother's memory was quietly rewritten. When Charles dies, Kate becomes queen. The title Her Majesty the Queen passes to her. Camilla would most likely become Queen Dowager, a designation that carries dignity but represents an unmistakable reduction in standing that the entire world would observe in real time. And unlike Camilla's own title, which is protected by nothing except the continued reign of her husband, her future title, her future residence, and her future access to the royal world she has inhabited for 20 years will depend on a man whose first act of ownership over this estate was to remove her family from it. Sources indicate that King Charles has spoken privately and urgently with William about Camilla's future, appealing to him personally to protect her after he is gone, to extend her courtesy and stability in whatever time she has left. It is the request of a father who loves his wife and knows what his son is capable of. William's response has not come in words. It has come in payroll documents, in Christmas absences, in the quiet and systematic replacement of everything his father built around Camilla with people and arrangements of his own choosing. The empire Camilla spent 20 years building, the access, the influence, the family positions, the carefully managed press relationships, all of it rests on a foundation of one man's continued good health. When that foundation shifts, she will discover what William actually decided. And unlike his brother Harry, William has never been one to signal what he is thinking before he is ready to act.